A maintenance log, 25 entries. Each one lists a locomotive number, a boiler inspection date, a running gear check, and a status field. For 26 months, that status field read the same thing on every line: serviceable. The machines were not running. They sat in storage at Cheyenne, Wyoming, Green River, Wyoming, and Ogden, Utah, while diesel locomotives and gas turbines took the work those machines had spent 18 years doing. But they were not retired. Union Pacific kept them fueled, inspected, and functional, every one of them, for over 2 years after the last revenue run. The official story says the steam era ended on July 21, 1959, when the last big boy completed its final revenue trip in the dark somewhere between Laramie and Cheyenne. The maintenance logs say something different. They say the institution was not sure. Have you ever watched an organization keep something alive because it was afraid to let it go, and then destroy it the moment the fear passed? Leave your answer in the comments, and subscribe to American Iron Works if the record behind the official story is what you come here for. The real end of the steam era was not July 21, 1959. It was the day Union Pacific decided the insurance was no longer necessary. That day came in September 1961. By then, the 26-month standstill had produced a number. The railroad's mechanical department had been running a parallel calculation since the day the fleet went into storage. Diesel and turbine reliability data from the first 2 years of the transition were measured against the Wasatch traffic load and compared against the monthly cost of keeping 25 big boys in operational condition. At some point, that calculation produced a result. The machines that replaced the big boys were performing well enough. No surge had come. No catastrophic failure had tested the new power on the Wasatch grade. The insurance policy had not been needed. In September 1961, Union Pacific opened the scrap program. Number 4015 was the first to go. It had made its final revenue run on July 21, 1959. It was one of the last big boys to run that morning. It was the same unit that had been returned to service just weeks before for the final summer season, one of only a handful pulled from the storage lines while the rest sat waiting. 13 months after that last run, it was retired. Within the following year, 16 more would follow. To understand why that decision made sense in 1961 and why it looks different in 2026, you need to understand the man who made it. David Sanborn. Neuhart started at Union Pacific in June 1918 as a coach cleaner in Salt Lake City. He was not yet 20 years old. He spent the next 8 years cleaning rail cars, studying engineering on his own time, and working his way into the mechanical department. By 1942, he was master mechanic in Los Angeles. By 1945, he was assistant general superintendent in Omaha. On April 1, 1949, he was appointed general superintendent of motive power and machinery, the top mechanical position at one of the largest railroads in the country. He had spent his entire career in the shadow of Otto Jabelmann. Jabelmann was the man who had designed the big boys. He had started at Union Pacific the same way Neuhart had, as a laborer in the engine facilities at Cheyenne, the same city where Jabelmann was born. He had studied engineering at Stanford and the University of Michigan, climbed through the mechanical department, and eventually run it. In 1940, Union Pacific President William Jeffers told Jabelmann to solve the Wasatch problem. William Jeffers had grown up inside Union Pacific. He had dropped out of school at 14 after a fistfight with his teacher and joined the railroad as a janitor in North Platte, Nebraska. By 1937, he was running the entire railroad. He was not an engineer, he was a freight man. When he told Jabelmann to fix the Wasatch, he meant it in the simplest possible terms: stop using 2 locomotives where 1 should be enough. The grade between Ogden, Utah, and Green River, Wyoming had required helper engines since the Transcontinental Railroad was completed in 1869. 71 years of the same problem, solved the same way every time. Jabelmann's team calculated that 135,000 pounds of tractive effort was required to haul 3,600 tons over the range unassisted. Assuming a factor of adhesion of 4, the weight on drivers would have to be 540,000 pounds. That required 16 driving wheels. An articulated locomotive, 2 complete engine sets under a single boiler, hinged in the middle so the machine could navigate curves, was the only workable design. They settled on the 4-8-8 wheel arrangement. 4 lead wheels for stability entering curves, 2 sets of 8 drivers, and 4 trailing wheels to support the massive firebox. Nothing like it had ever been built for regular freight service. The design process took approximately 1 year, 6 months to design and 6 months to build the first unit in collaboration with the American Locomotive Company at its plant in Schenectady, New York. Number 4000 was delivered to Union Pacific at Omaha on September 5, 1941. An American Locomotive Company worker had chalked the name Big Boy on the smokebox door during construction. The official name was Wasatch. The chalked name outlasted it. Jabelmann had been 50 years old when the first Big Boy rolled out of Schenectady. The 25 machines entered service at the exact moment the United States entered World War II. Steel from eastern mills had to move west to the aircraft factories of California. Troops moved in both directions. Ammunition, fuel, vehicles, and equipment moved in volumes the pre-war railroad had not been designed to handle. At peak wartime traffic, the Big Boys were not running a mountain grade, they were running a national supply chain. Each of the first 20 Big Boys was built at a cost of $265,000. That is roughly $5.8 million in 2025 dollars. All 20 were delivered by 1941. 5 more, the Class II units, numbers 4020 through 4024, arrived in 1944 as wartime demand continued to exceed the fleet's capacity. The 25 Big Boys collectively accumulated 25,008,054 miles over 18 years of service, approximately the distance from Earth to Venus at closest approach. On April 3, 1943, a test on the Wasatch grade documented number 4016 producing 7,157 horsepower at the cylinders while hauling 3,883 tons at 41.1 miles per hour. Drawbar horsepower, the pull actually transmitted to the train, was 6,290. That number would be the reference point for everything Neuhart built to replace them. Jabelmann died in 1943. He died before a single Big Boy had completed 1 million miles of service. He died before any of them ran their final revenue trip. He died 18 years before 17 of them would be cut up. He knew what he had built. He did not live to see what was done with it. Neuhart inherited the railroad Jabelmann had built, and he inherited the question Jabelmann never had to answer: what comes after the Big Boys? Neuhart's answer was the gas turbine. The gas turbine electric locomotive, GTEL, used a jet engine rather than a diesel engine to drive the generator that powered its traction motors. In theory, it could produce far more horsepower per unit than anything Union Pacific had ever operated. The prototype, a 4,500 horsepower unit built by the Alco-G partnership, arrived in 1948 for testing on the New York, Chicago, and St. Louis Railroad and the Pennsylvania Railroad before being transferred to Union Pacific, which redesignated it Number 50. Union Pacific ran Number 50 from July 1949 through April 1951. It was impressed enough to order 10 more. The first 10 production units arrived between January 1952 and August 1953 at a cost of $540,000 each. They burned bunker C heavy fuel oil, a thick, black residual crude that sold at a steep discount to diesel because it was too heavy for most other engines. The fuel had to be heated to around 200 degrees Fahrenheit just to flow into the turbine. The GTELs consumed it in enormous quantities, burning twice as much fuel as an equally powerful diesel. But the price of bunker C was low enough that the math worked. Union Pacific said its turbines were hauling more than 10% of the railroad's freight by the mid-1950s. In 1954, a second generation of 15 turbines arrived, nicknamed verandas for the open walkways along their sides. The verandas produced 4,500 horsepower each. They were paired with former steam locomotive tenders converted to carry additional fuel, which extended their range to Council Bluffs, Iowa. Between 1958 and 1961, the third generation arrived. 30 units, each producing 8,500 horsepower. 1 unit, 8,500 horsepower. A big boy produced 6,290 drawbar horsepower. On paper, the third-generation turbines made the big boys obsolete. Neuhart had spent a decade building toward this moment. The single-unit, high-horsepower locomotive that could handle the Wasatch work without a helper engine, without a coal tender, without the maintenance overhead of a machine designed in 1940. The 26-month standstill was his answer to the question nobody in the institution wanted to ask aloud, but what if the turbines fail? Every month, the maintenance logs kept reading, serviceable. Neuhart's calculation got cleaner. The turbines were holding. Traffic on the Wasatch kept moving. Every month without a failure made the backup insurance harder to justify. In September 1961, the calculation produced its final number, which brings us to the detail. The official record does not explain. Not one of the 17 locomotives that went to the torch between September 1961 and June 1963 was condemned for mechanical failure. Not one was declared beyond repair. Each of the original 20 big boys had run over 1 million miles by the time the scrap program began. Number 4006, the highest mileage unit in the fleet, had accumulated 1,064,625 miles, more than 43 times the circumference of the Earth. Number 4016, the lowest mileage unit of the original 20, had still run 1,016,124 miles. The 5 Class II units, delivered later in 1944 and given less time in service, had each accumulated over 800,000 miles, the equivalent of circling the Earth 32 times apiece. Collectively, all 25 big boys had run 25,008,054 miles combined. That is approximately the distance from Earth to Venus at closest approach. They were not worn out, they were no longer the cheapest option. The distinction matters. When an institution retires a machine because it is broken, the record reflects that. When an institution retires a machine that works perfectly and destroys it anyway, the record goes quiet. The 17 big boys that were scrapped between 1961 and 1963 are documented by their absence. Their numbers appear in the roster of 25. They are not among the 8 survivors. No public account records the individual scrapping dates for most of them. No authorization document survives in the public record naming who signed the order for each unit. The engineering record of their construction, precise to the quarter-inch, cross-referenced across multiple ALCO and Union Pacific documents, has no equivalent for their destruction. Number 4013 is documented being scrapped at Cheyenne on April 13, 1963. The date survives in a photograph caption. That is the entire public record of the destruction of one of the most powerful steam locomotives ever built in regular service. That particular silence is also the point. An institution confident in its decision does not linger over the paperwork. It moves. Between September 1961 and June 1963, Union Pacific moved. Number 4015 in September 1961. Numbers 4000 and 4001 in November. Number 4002 in February 1962. Number 4013 in April. Number 4003, the unit Steam Giants labels the last serviceable big boy, in May 1963. Number 4011 in June 1963, the last one cut up. The machines that gave Neuhart the confidence to begin that program were retired 6 years later. The third-generation gas turbines, the 8,500 horsepower units whose 2-year reliability record had closed the 26-month standstill, ran their last revenue trip on December 26, 1969. Less than 10 years after the scrap program began, the replacement fleet was gone. Did Neuhart make the wrong call? Drop that in the comments because the record does not give a clean answer, and neither will this video. What the record gives is arithmetic. Union Pacific scrapped 17 machines that had each run between 800,000 and 1,064,625 miles over 18 years of service, built at $265,000 each, because the machines replacing them produced 8,500 horsepower per unit. The machines producing 8,500 horsepower lasted 9 years. The first and second generation turbines, the ones that had been displacing big boys since 1952, were all retired by 1964. None of them were preserved. The prototype and first generation units were scrapped by 1964. The veranda types, all 15 of them, retired between August 1963 and June 1964. Of the 55 GTEL locomotives Union Pacific operated over 2 decades, 2 survive today, number 18 at the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, and number 26 at the Utah State Railroad Museum in Ogden. Both are incomplete and non-operational. The locomotive that runs the former Wasatch corridor today is a diesel-electric producing approximately 3,000 horsepower, less than half of a big boy's 6,290 drawbar horsepower, less than half of the 8,500 horsepower that justified the scrapping. Neuhart's succession of replacements, each one larger and more powerful than the last, each one retired in a shorter window than the one before, ended up with the corridor running on less power than the machines he inherited. He retired from Union Pacific in September 1971. The last gas turbine had already been gone for almost 2 years. He died in Omaha on November 6, 1973. He had never seen the machines he scrapped run again. He never would. The Alco plant in Schenectady, New York, where all 25 big boys were built, shipped its last 2 locomotives, a pair of T6 switches for the Newburgh and South Shore Railroad, in January 1969. It closed permanently. What closed with it was not just a production line, it was the industrial knowledge that turned a set of drawings into 604 tons of functioning steel. The Alco facility in Schenectady had operated continuously since 1848. 121 years. It was demolished in 2019. A casino opened on the site. Of the 8 big boys that were not scrapped, 6 stand outdoors today. Number 4006, the highest mileage survivor at 1,064,625 miles, stands in the open air at the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis. Number 4004 stands in Holiday Park in Cheyenne, Wyoming, the city where Jabelman was born, where he started as a laborer, and where the big boys were maintained throughout their operational careers. Number 4023 stands in Kennefic Park in Omaha, Nebraska, the city that received the first big boy delivery on September 5, 1941. Steam Giants, which maintains the most detailed condition assessments of surviving big boys, notes that number 4023, once considered the second best restoration candidate after 4014, has been measurably degraded by decades of Nebraska weather. The machines that exist are a record of individual decisions made against a default outcome. Number 4006 survives. Because someone at a St. Louis museum made a phone call in 1954, 7 years before the scrap program began, and negotiated a donation before the institution had decided to destroy anything. Number 4012 survives because a seafood industrialist from Rhode Island named F. Nelson Blount spent $6,000 of his own money to ship it dead in tow from Council Bluffs, Iowa to Bellows Falls, Vermont in 1964, and had to establish a non-profit organization first because Union Pacific could not donate a locomotive to an individual. Blount died on August 31, 1967. His private airplane struck a tree during an emergency landing in New Hampshire. He was 49 years old. He had saved number 4012 from the torch. He never saw what his collection became. Number 4014, the only operating big boy, exists because it was donated to a Railway Historical Society in California in 1962, sat in outdoor display at the Los Angeles County Fairgrounds for 52 years, and was still in recoverable condition when Union Pacific decided in 2013 that restoring one was worth doing. The restoration took 6 years. There is no systematic explanation for why these 8 and not some other 8 survived. There is only the record of who made a phone call, who negotiated a donation, who spent $6,000 of their own money to ship a locomotive across the country. After the 26-month standstill, 25 machines entered the calculation. 17 of them were worth only what a scrapyard would pay. 8 survivors remain. The decision to scrap the other 17 was rational, given the information available in 1961. Bunker C's cost advantage evaporated as oil prices rose and the plastics industry began competing for that fuel grade. Turbine blade erosion from corrosive heavy crude drove maintenance costs faster than the operating savings could offset them. Neuhart was not wrong in the logic he was running. He was running the only logic the institution gave him. Whether the institution should have asked different questions, whether the irreversibility of scrapping 17 of the most powerful steam locomotives ever built in regular service warranted a different frame than per unit horsepower, is the question the maintenance logs never had a field for. The 26-month standstill is the closest the record comes to admitting the institution knew the decision was larger than the calculation. 2 years of hesitation written into the operational record, then a year and a half of cutting, then silence. That is the full Accounting Union Pacific left behind. Subscribe to American Iron Works, the record is still running.